And that has been an issue which has always been at the heart of the development, i.e., what's the balance between losses and gains? And I am of the view, not surprisingly, that actually the gains will be enormous. And I think it'll be great for the schools as for the academy as a whole. If there's a disturbance, it leaves the public to resolve the disturbance. You don't try and resolve it architecturally. There was an architectural competition in, I think, 1996, which led to Michael and Patty Hopkins being appointed. But there were 5 other practices who were part of the finalists, one of which was David Chipperfield. And then there was a second competition in, I think, 2002, which was won by Sandy Wilson. But at least 6 other architectural practices were involved in what to do then. And then when I started in 2007, we had a limited competition by invitation of 6 practices. So there were 6 practices who looked at the problem then. And you do get every which way of dealing with it. You connect it over the schools, under the schools, this way, that way, through the main galleries. And I thought that was a waste of time and energy. And the central task was the renovation of Wellington Gardens. It was possible to consider having an axial connection between the existing Burlington House and the old University of London building. I wasn't at the meeting, so that I can't document or record how the discussion went. But my sense is that Morris could see that whilst there would be losses in the sense of the integrity of the schools, there would be corresponding gains in the visibility of the schools. And that has been an issue which has always been at the heart of the development. Look, in reality, Burlington Gardens will never really work as part of the academy as a whole, as part of a unified site, if you don't work out how to connect the 2 buildings. Sandy Wilson, who was the architect of the British Library, drew up a big master plan which deliberately avoided the schools and had a route alongside Albany to a courtyard. It was a very intelligent, well-considered scheme, but the majority of the architects who are academicians were critical of it because there was an illogicality. So the benefits are, from my perspective, that the Cast Corridor is one of the more interesting historic spaces in London. It's special because it gives an indication of the history of art teaching in this country, because for a long time the schools was the major place for art teaching, and it's a visible history of how art was taught through the study of classical sculpture. So that's absolutely straightforward gain. Exactly as you describe, there's a horizontal axis which runs across the site, and there's a vertical axis, an implied vertical axis, which runs front door to front door, and they cross across the cast corridor. It is a charged space, and I've discovered in walking people through the project, we always end up standing at the center of the cross. Sensibly, how are you going to manage the transition? And I'm the first to acknowledge that we've never completely figured it out, because you've got school students going across, and you've got the public, however many of them, going through the site, and exactly how they interact and what the nature of that interaction is not clear, I think, to anybody. We have endless discussions about, some people want to glass it in. I'm anti that, because the anxiety that you create an atmosphere in which people are looking through a glass barricade as if into a shop or I wouldn't disguise or dispute the fact that there's a symbolic significance to the way the site is constructed, that most things go north-south and the schools go east-west. And how you manage that transition is why it's been tricky as an architectural project. I started in 2007, and we had an architectural competition which led to the appointment of David Chipperfield in May 2008. What I think is clever about David's scheme, and why thus far, touch wood, it's gone through the system, unusually, uncontroversially, is because it's what he describes as a soft touch scheme. It doesn't interfere with the way the building was conceived. It's very well considered. I think, but obviously I have a vested interest in thinking this, that David's scheme people have seen as being a very logical and intelligent solution. And David has a very high reputation amongst his peer group. In a sense, a higher reputation probably amongst his peer group than necessarily in the public. And carrying your peer group as architects with you on this journey is far from straightforward.
It's interesting that you used the word straightforward there as well, because I think that's a word that comes up in the plan quite a lot. This idea about something being straightforward and clear.
Yeah.
And I think that's
front door to front door, yeah. Bridge across the backyard, reinstate the Lech Theatre in the space which was originally occupied by a Lech Theatre, putting galleries at the back, maintain the integrity of the history of the site. I think that's where it's very equivalent to the work he did at the Neues Museum in Berlin, because that's the same idea of being sensitive to the history and doing a small number of contemporary interventions. The geometry of the Lech Theatre, and it has the potential of being incredibly impressive because it's based consciously. I mean, Penetor may have based it consciously on Palladio's Lech Theatre in Vicenza, and David Chipperfield definitely based it consciously on Palladio's Lech in Vicenza. And Palladio based the Lech Theatre in Vicenza on Greek Lech theatres in Delphi and Corinth. And the whole idea of the Greek Lech theatres was that 30,000 people, the entire community, would come in order to discuss and debate issues of public concern. So there is a kind of emblematic importance to that. what's the balance between losses and gains. And I am of the view, not surprisingly, that actually the gains will be enormous. And I think it'll be great for the schools as for the academy as a whole.